Welcome to the No Quit Living podcast. Our primary objective is to motivate and inspire our listeners to never quit. The reality of life is simple. We all fall. We all fail. At times, we get knocked down. The question is, do we get back up? Are we stronger? Are we better prepared to attain the maximum of our potential? Thank you for joining our No Quit tribe. As you go for your greatness today, never quit. And remember, we rise by lifting others up. Welcome to episode number 633 of the No Quit Living podcast. I'm your host, Christopher J. Worth, and today's theme is compete every day. Our quote of the day comes to us from Andrew Whitworth. If you're a true warrior, competition doesn't scare you, it makes you better. Before we jump into today's episode, I would like to kindly remind you, if you have yet to subscribe to our show or left us a review, we would truly appreciate it. Thank you again for your continued support. I'm excited to welcome back today's guest, Jake Thompson, who joins us for the third time on the podcast. Jake continues to bring incredible perspective, energy, and knowledge, and I'm confident that you are going to enjoy today's episode. Jake, I'd like to welcome you back for the third time to the No Quit Living podcast.
Dude, let's rock and roll. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate it. You and I reconnected, not that we've been disconnected, but I had seen one of your posts and we talked offline, your first non-traditional book. You went the route of a fable, which we were talking about. That's been the first few books that I've written. So it was really cool because you were saying that you struggled a bit with the writing of the fable. And I was very honest with you that my first non-fable book, I've been struggling with just the change and tweaks. So I think that's really cool that people that are in, and I'll call us, I guess, similar spaces, how we can be very similar and we talk, I think, a similar language, but it's like you excel in writing this area. I don't excel in that area. And that's, to me, why it's so cool to have different people in your network. So I say that to first off say congratulations on the upcoming book. And again, just thank you for jumping back on here for a third time.
Dude, I appreciate it. And as I told you off air, and I'll say it again on air, like your level of respect for people that can do what you can't do or that do it really well, like yourself writing the fictional story, is always amplified of like an enjoyment level. Like I love reading the fictional stories and you know, you've got the big names in our industry, the John Gordons, the Patrick Lencioni's, but even just like fictional, like Jack Carr is one of my favorite authors. And Andy Weir, who I've started to fall in love with his work after reading Project Hail Mary, I'm just like, man, how y'all's brain pulls the stories together, whether we're talking in a short lesson format or a large fictional, science fiction, whatever. And I'm like, I'm always been a consumer in that space because my brain is very much like, no, this is the process, do the steps, here we go. And so it was a really interesting challenge for me, but going through it was kind of you see people throw a football and you're like, oh man, you know, I can throw a football like that. And then you see somebody who can really throw a football and they can thread the needle. And then you're like, oh, like that. It's just different. And so you just have a whole level of respect going through the process that, you know, the armchair quarterbacks on Monday morning never have because they never try to do the thing that they watch everybody else do.
It's so funny that you referenced that analogy of throw a football. I played football growing up and played quarterback in high school. And I've always had a good arm in the sense of a strong arm. And I could throw the ball. But to your point, when you actually throw the ball or see someone that can really spin it, you're like, oh, okay, like, so I can throw it in the sense of like 9th, 10th grade level. And like this person is like at a different level. And as I said, I do have a pretty good arm, but I remember first time I was just throwing around with this guy that was throwing. He was a quarterback in college and I was throwing 30 or 40 yard passes and they were pretty accurate. And he just came out and he warmed up a little bit and I was watching him like, okay. And then once he got loose, you know, he started at 30 and 40, then he went to 50 and 60. And I was just like, okay. I was like, that's the difference of like why I'm here. And as he's throwing and just getting warmed up, I'm like, okay, that's a whole different level.
And that, I mean, that's the funny part. Like I laugh. my backup in high school was a year younger than me. Great guy, but like 70 yards flick of the wrist, like just what a cannon. Now at the same time, and he'll be the first to admit it, there was not a touch pass on a screen or a jailbreak. And so those guys that were like 4 to 5 yards away were getting that 70-yard rocket. But it was crazy, like when we would warm up, because like, yeah, you'd get to the point and I'm like, dude, I'm crow hopping at this point. And you're just like, doo. And I'm like, you got to come in. You got to come in.
I remember doing a drill and same exact thing. He's just, guys are going farther, and I'm with the receivers. I'm like, all right, we'll do some, some close passes and let's get warmed up. And to your point, I'm like triple hopping, like in baseball, like an outfielder. And, I'm getting the ball there, but like you see my body and like I'm putting everything into it. And he's just, two steps back, drops, and just fire. And I'm like, dude, this is, and he never, I want to be clear. He made it to a college level and he had a good college career at the Division I level, but he never made it to the professional level. I think he had 2 or 3 like CFL type things. But my point is just that even shows you where I thought I was kind of good, then he was really good. And then there's just like that extra level where I could probably hand off the ball at that level. Be like, okay, I'll help the running backs warm up.
There are levels to everything, right? There's levels to speaking. There's levels to playing football. And most people, until you try to do the pursuit, don't really understand it. But like someone like yourself and myself who are constantly looking to grow and learn, you look for those levels. Like I want to see who are master communicators. What do they do differently? How do they manage it? All of that. Not from man, they're so much better than me, why bother? But like, 1, I want to admire the craft, but 2, I want to learn. Like, what are you doing? How did you get to this point? Like, let's back it up 5 to 10 steps where, that's where I'm fascinated by, versus the like natural talent from like throwing the football to where you're like, I'm never going to throw 70, like just not going to happen. And so what do I do really well? But what does that quarterback that throws 70 do? And what can I do better? And so that's where that whole kind of game comes in, that I think people have to be mindful of where they're letting their attention and focus go.
I think that's a perfect segue into your book, which comes out in a couple weeks from now, I believe, which is titled The Line, A Story of Excellence in the Margins. I knew it was a fable, so I was excited to read it. I have obviously read your first 2 books, so I was also excited to read it because I've enjoyed your stuff and as well as your friendship. But the simplicity of the title for me, and I mean this, and I hope none of the readers or listeners, take this as a knock on you, because it's actually not. For what I think it's the highest compliment is people that know their craft can simplify it for others and coach it and teach it to others. And maybe a tough first question, but what led you to actually not only write this book, but then what led you to really talk about touching the line and then going so much further?
Yeah, so there's a few things kind of to that. So I would say the first reason for this book specifically is over the last 7 years now as a keynoter, 99% of the events I speak at, somebody comes up and are like, what do you have for my kid? Like, oh, I wish my kid plays this in college or they play this sport in high school. Like, do you have anything for them? And there were so many at times I'd be like, compete every day. Like, here's the first book. But it really wasn't written one for them and tailored really for sports. Like competing every day, like we talk sports, but it's how do you apply it in life? And so I didn't have it. And I kind of hated not having an answer for that. Majority of my work is in corporate, like 90% of my work is in corporate. And so I don't spend a whole lot of times on high school and college campuses unless kind of timing works out with some of those groups. But I still want to serve them because I know my own journey. And I talked about it in book 2, like just mentally getting destroyed when I got to college from an academic standpoint initially, and then athletically putting my focus in comparison in the wrong place and giving up on some dreams because I was afraid of failing at it because I was focused on the wrong target. And so that ate me for years and years. And so I wanted to help others who'd gone through that situation, because one of the other things I would get after keynotes when I told that story about TCU is people would come up and be like, I thought I was the only one. Like, I went through that exact same thing. And I'm like, okay, I've got to help this audience. Now, flash forward, I've always been that touching the line kind of deal. Everybody knows the line, whether we're doing basketball sprints, football sprints, it. We used to do it football, sideline to sideline. And there is a difference between the people that cut corners and ones who don't. And I'm still, to this day, I get really annoyed at the gym in a group class when we have a leaderboard workout. And I'm like, bro, you're not going full depth on squats. Like, if we're going to leaderboard this, like, I want equal standards across the board, because I'm like, the only way we can compare our progress, right, if we're going to score it, is equal standards to say, okay, this is what I did. How do I get better? So I've always been around that. So it's funny, the book, I initially had it titled something else. We were going to call it The Extra Inch, of like that difference, that gap between almost touching the line and touching the line. And I probably have too many immature friends, as well as understanding this is going to high school and college students as well as coaches. And I was like, we probably need to change that. And there's somebody out there that has the phrase touch the line in business books. They own a trademark for business and apparel. And so I wanted to be mindful of that. And since this is a personal development book, I was like, the extra inch doesn't work. We went through a few options, competitor choice, which we teach in the book. And I was like, I think the line is just it. We're just going to call it the line. Because if you ever played sports, you know what it's like. One, get on the line. And two, make sure you touch the line. Like, the line is the separates the start point and it's the measurement point. And so that's really it. As we talked about off air, like, the themes of the book are really important to me, but I felt it was really important to teach it in a more simple format. And I say that from a story. Story is the easiest way we consume information. I've got tons of research that backs everything in this book. But for me to appeal to a younger audience, for me to present something that you could go down rabbit holes on in the compete framework, I needed to do it at a higher level that someone could grasp and start to implement. And then once they start to implement, it's where you get the hunger of, how do I actually do more of this? How do I do this a little bit better? And having some more stuff down the line for them.
I'm so glad you said the word simple, because I kind of segued into my first question. And as I said before, I've read so many books, and you and I probably could talk about a couple hundred books that are similar that we've read. But what I find a lot of the time, and this is just from a reader's perspective and somebody that also, similar to you, is really into learning, is a lot of people overcomplicate something because they feel that it needs to be 350 pages or there needs to be 25 steps. And I remember one of my first coaches years ago, he always said, simplify, simplify, simplify. And I kid you not, the first 100 times he said it, I was struggling in my mind because I was thinking the opposite, where, i.e. a good segue question into my next question for you, is competing against guys like John Maxwell, right? So I'm like, oh, I'm a quote unquote speaker, I'm an author. And it's like, well, how come I haven't had 30 million, books sold? And how come he can take this lesson and talk about it for 19 hours? And my coach just continued, simplify, simplify, simplify. But I think your book follows, first of all, a really nice flow. Second of all, a high school story where obviously if the readers are in high school or middle school or out of high school, they're either going to have been in high school, about to be, or had a friend, cousin, sibling that already was through it, or they might be in college or after. But it's so easy to put yourself in that situation. But then what I love about your writing is you have so many points and you have so many different things that lead the reader down a really fun rabbit hole, in the sense of, okay, well, what would I do here? And how would I respond to this? And I just think that, for anybody that is looking to share a book with, high school, and I would even say, your book fits really well in middle school as well, because those athletes and coaches and parents are, a year, 2 or 3 out when their son or daughter is going to be playing or competing in high school. I say that little bit long-winded, but What was the hardest part about translating your corporate world messages into more of a fable style?
Yeah, it's interesting. Earlier this year, I was working with one of my coaches and we got really clear on the framework, right? A lot of this stuff, to what you talked about, like I've been talking about a lot of this stuff forever. This, how do you compete with yourself? All of this. But there wasn't almost a process that, like, here's the 7 questions, run through these, like literally be intentional about answering these. And when he and I started to put this together, I was like, oh, well, this is very simple. Like it's just boom, 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 boom. And you can do it in school and you can do it in sports and you can do it in a sales call. You can do it in a relationship. And so once we kind of pulled that piece of it, then it was, what would it look like for a student? And I wanted to write the story, and you made a really good point, and I appreciate, like, I want parents and coaches reading this, and I wrote it in a way that they can pull from, because they're the ones responsible for the continued conversation. They're the ones, just like the parents in the book, they're the ones of like, what's the game we're playing? Like, who are you competing with? Like, let's get clear on like all of these other questions, because it's going to help reinforce for the athlete who becomes the adult, who becomes the person thriving in life and still uses the same framework and processes. And so, you know, James Clear talks about it. And there was a quote, I can't even remember, of like complicated and, you know, rocket science. And then like the highest level of intelligence is simple. Like that's it. It's just simplicity to a T. And to that point, you know this, both of us playing sports. If it's complicated, you can't execute. Like, you want to make things simple. I actually heard sports talk radio guys this week in Dallas criticizing the head coach for, they were talking about simplifying things on defense. They're like, the defense is already the worst in the league. Why would you make it simple? And I'm like, because they can play faster. You think less, you react more, you know what to do. And we have to do that in life. Like if we're going to apply a lesson, you mentioned it, John Gordon, right? Energy bus. Very simple. Like your energy is contagious. What's the energy you're bringing to your situation? But when it's simple, it can remain top of mind. And when it's top of mind, it means you can apply it. And it's easy to apply. People, we tend to think complexity means it works better, when in reality, simplicity is what works better. And that's why, like Dave Ramsey, right? Simplicity, pay cash, get out of debt, cut credit cards. Like, he's a very simple process. Now, here's the thing most people confuse that I know you understand, I understand, and I believe a lot of our readers do. Simple doesn't mean easy. Simple is just easier to consume, not easier to execute. And so for us, it was interesting. When I finished the first draft of the book, I sent it to 6 people. I sent it to a college AD, 2 sports parents, one whose kid is 10, one whose kid's in high school. I sent it to a high school head football coach. I sent it to a sports psychologist and a mental performance coach. I said, tear it apart. And all of them came back and said, hey, there's some inconsistencies in the storyline. Rookie here writing fictional stories. But they were like, the framework and the process works. And here's what the conversations I've already had with my kid or with one of my players. So when the book's ready, let me know. And I was like, awesome. So they gave me the feedback that they could read it, even if it's sloppy mess and some of the story didn't make sense, and say, here's what I can immediately put into practice with my kid. Then it was like, okay, we really got to get this thing ready to go.
I'm going to change lanes here for a second, because you brought up something. And for our listeners, I did ask Jake if there's anything specific, and he said, go wherever you want to go. So he did give me permission before. You touched on something earlier that I wrote down as to come back, to circle back to, but you've been a keynote speaker now for 7 years, a little bit longer than I have. But one thing I want to commend you on, and I'd love for you to touch on it for a minute or two, is you've shared throughout your podcast, on my podcast, on a lot of your social media, how it was a struggle early on and you put in the work. I know for a fact you've hired coaches. You and I have worked with some of the same people. And I want you, if you can, for a minute or two, just to share with our listeners the value in what it takes behind the scenes. And in your book, you touch on it. And I've touched on it. My third book is, those unseen hours when the lights aren't on. And we all know those things conceptually. But one of the things I wanted just to commend you, and I appreciate you being so candid about it, is you don't just talk about it and you don't come on social media and say, hey, I'm Jake Thompson and, I charge X amount and I'm speaking here and here. You've shared a lot of your struggles along the way. And for me, that's not only exciting, but I sit and I take notes and I say, okay, someone who's a little bit farther than me and is doing one thing a little bit better, or two things I can learn. And I don't think enough people, especially kids, are willing to do that and vulnerable enough to share some of that. So I know that was a smorgasbord of a question, but just wanted
No, I'm with you. So a couple of things, right? I hire coaches every year. I'm very intentional about it. One, I think coaches are crucial for our growth and success, and they speed it up. You're going to make mistakes regardless, but what I found is I've always 10x my coaching investment. And so each year I go into across the board business coach if I'm intentional. This year I hired 2 different coaches on the professional side to help me with skilling up my keynote around an upcoming book and just working on the performance side. And then I hired a coach on the mindset side and said, hey, I got a lot of things going on personally and professionally. I need to sharpen my mindset. I haven't worked with a mental performance coach. I know the basics. I know what to do, but I need to lock in a few areas emotionally, mentally, whatnot. And so I'm very intentional about that going into, because it's just like you believe, right? I have to continually improve so I bring better to the world and the people I care about serving. Now, what's really interesting you mentioned about the other comment is twofold to this. The first is because I'm not playing anyone else's game, I don't really feel like I'm in ultra competitive with other people. I love to compete with people. I love some of our mutual friends and guests that you've had on the show. There's people I go up against for gigs and I'm like, who's going to get it? Oh, did I get it this time? You got it. But I'm not putting my stock and my worth in, are they better than me? Do they make more money on stage than me? Because I also know the nature of our speaking business. I'm going to keynote your conference this year. Maybe in 4 years, I'll get to come back if I did a really good job. That means over the next 4 years, 3 other speakers are going to fill the gap. And so if I do a really good job, who do I know that does a good job that maybe either raises their standard and expectations or delivers for them? And so I'm always looking for that abundance mindset. And it's really hard when we are, especially when we're younger. Sports, right? There's one person that starts. You're fighting for that starting spot. You don't want to give the edge to anybody else because you're focused on beating them and not how do I get better to dominate the position, right? Because it's hard at that age to have the mentality, Chris, if you get better and we're going after the same opportunity, I can get mad at you, or I can say, man, Chris is getting really good. I need to raise my game. I can't be comfortable. And that's where the iron sharpens iron, right? It's the friction. It's the sharpening. It's not an easy process. And so you need other people who are going to push you. I can tell you for a fact, playing high school football, the fact that my backup could throw it 70 yards on a rope and was a way better athlete forced me to know every play, to know where everybody was on the field, to be incredibly accurate and smarter decision-making. It forced me to be better than if the guy who played behind me was not that good, because I knew I've got to raise my game to keep up. So that's a really key aspect. The struggle part of it kind of falls right into that. I had someone earlier this year tell me, maybe at the beginning of the year, I said, I'm trying to do these different things. And she told me something that a coach had also told me, which was really funny. But she was like, I want you to be more vulnerable in how you show up on social media this year. That would be a win for me, just knowing you. And I said, well, what do you mean? And she said, you went through just heck making this pivot from apparel into speaking. And then you are new to the business and you had to prove that you could do it. And so you were talking about it and you were striving for it, but you weren't at the level that you felt like you'd made it. And she was like, you're doing the work. You're doing the work. You have the clients, you're on the stages. You don't have to prove that you can do it. Now's the best chance to say, here's what I did to get here. And she said, I know it's hard when you still have big goals that you're trying to achieve, because you're like, I'm not at that target yet that I set. But she was like, thinking back, like if you told yourself in 2018 when you were going through the struggles, like this is what you do now, you'd be like, oh my gosh, like let's go. And so that was a big challenge on them, is how do you connect more? Because in a one-on-one setting, I was happy to pull the playbook back and be like, here's what I struggled with. Here's what we went through, all of these things. But I was never more in an open setting. And what I found is it's everything that they said were right? It creates better connection because people don't connect with perfect. They connect with mistakes, because we all make mistakes. And what happens is we go on social media oftentimes and we go through challenges of, man, I see everybody's highlight reels. God, you made all district again. Oh, you got that keynote again. Oh, you did this new sale again. Oh, your book sold and made this bestseller list. And we easily start to beat ourselves up in that comparison game. And it's such a dangerous trap, because we can't compare to the person who's looking perfect. But if you get on there and you're like, man, I didn't sleep last night. My dog got up and threw up, and I woke up and just didn't feel it. But man, I went in the gym and I did 100 lunges. And I'm posting this on social, and you know what? I just want to tell you, I'm proud of me today. It's not the best workout. It's not a pretty workout. Wasn't even my greatest workout. But I'm kind of happy that I found a way to do this, even though it sucked and I didn't want to be here. Like, those are the things people are like, man, me too. Or like, hey, I almost quit. Here's what I was going through. Here's why I didn't. Somebody else reading is like, oh, I was thinking about quitting, but I saw this. Let me see. And so it creates better connection points to help people. And I think I've done a better job of it offline and on stage than I had online. But it was just an intentional goal and a challenge from one of my coaches this year of, this is what I want to see from you. And I was like, cool, I have no idea what that looks like, but let's give it a shot.
I asked I don't want to say simple question. I asked a relatively simple question, and you really opened up, and I really hope that people listening to this took a lot from that. But to go back to the very beginning piece, you and I have worked with some similar coaches over the years, and I think for me, as I'm looking to grow both personally, professionally, and become the best version of myself, what I've realized that attracts me on the social media side is people that are not only investing in coaches, but sharing their stories along the way, not from to your point, this is my best ever, everything's perfect, but more from the lines of, here's kind of where I messed up, here's where I fell short. And I think it's really valuable when you have those people in your circle that are willing to share those things. And I talk about this often, and I want to get your perspective on this. I don't ever want somebody to fail. I don't want somebody to lose or fall short. But for me, using football as an example, when Tom Brady wins a Super Bowl, I don't want to spend a half an hour with him right after they're done with their celebration. And again, that's not knocking him, and I'm not saying I don't want him to win, but for me, if I could interview him at one point, it would have been 2 days after he got his knee surgery, when he missed almost an entire season. I think it was the second or third game in the season. That's when I want to talk with him and ask him, what's your approach going to be? How are you mentally going to do it? How are you physically going to do it? Who's going to be in your corner? What are you going to learn? How are you going to take advantage of that? And I think if you look at people that are very successful at what they do, they have all worked with coaches and mentors along the way.
Yeah, no, 1,000% agree. It was interesting. Actually, this morning was listening to a podcast, somehow came across it, and they were interviewing Colt McCoy, legendary University of Texas quarterback, one of the winningest quarterbacks in NCAA history. And it was a faith-based kind of conversation, but it was fascinating because they were talking about kind of some of Colt's journey. Got injured in the national championship game, like first drive of the game, right? Doesn't play. The injury ends up lingering throughout a lot of his NFL career, which I never knew. But he played for 14 seasons, and he talked about like that process and that journey. And that was like the one I'm like, ooh, if I ever get Colt on my podcast, like I want to go back to that and dive deeper, because he talked about some of the things he did spiritually and with a mentor throughout college that really helped him navigate some of that season. And then going through the NFL, kind of what he was dealing with. That, to your point, like you want to know how are you going to handle the struggle and how did you handle the struggle? Because that's the more relatable one. I'll tell you this, one of my coaches, speaking coaches back in 2017, when I was starting to work with coaches and get into that industry, I was going through the imposter syndrome phase. And I told him, I was like, I think I can do this, but man, I look at Eric Thomas, the hip hop preacher. I look at the Lewis Howes. I look at the names at that time that were big in the space. And I'm like, I've never been homeless. I've never done any of these things that these other people talk about that you think of the traditional motivational speaker. And he just kind of smiled and he was like, Jake, how many people in your audience do you think have? He's like, how many people in your audience do you think would have been homeless or had a serious drug addiction or have dealt with this? I was like, I don't know, room of 100, maybe 1 or 2. He said, exactly. Which means the other 98, 99 are trying to figure out, how do I just do a better job? And how do I raise my kids right? And how do I handle getting through this divorce? And how can I start to go back to the gym when I don't feel like I have it? Like, they're relating to a lot of the things you went through. So connect with them on the things that y'all can relate together about being in the mess. And I just remember him telling me that. And I was like, oh, that's all there is to this. He was like, yeah. I mean, there's a lot to it, but that simplistic, like, that's it. It's connecting to people and adding value of being like, I've been there. Here's what I learned. Here's how you can do it too.
Tough question, but not for somebody like you. Somebody's listening right now, and to use your example you just shared, they're going through or coming out of a divorce. They are struggling to get to the gym. They are trying to be just a better version of themselves. What is a really, to use the word you just said, and I think we both said it about 10 times this episode, what's a really simple strategy to get somebody moving from day one? Not saying, okay, how do I be perfect or great today, but how do I just get going today and put that win in the column for today?
Yeah, there's a few things to that, right? I think probably the most simple question is, what would a motivated version of myself do this morning? Like, if I were motivated, well, I'd probably get up and go to the gym. I wouldn't hit the snooze button. And what would it look like if I didn't hit the snooze button? Well, then I've automatically gotten a win. Man, I got a win. I hit the snooze yesterday. I didn't hit the snooze today. So cool. That motivated version of myself would go to the gym. What if I go for a walk around the neighborhood? What if I go for a light workout in the garage? Like, it's kind of approaching it with more curiosity than certainty. I think that's a big piece of it. I think we come at a lot of those struggling seasons of, it's never going to end. This is how it is. Versus, what would it look like if? And I think that unlocks a new way of thinking. I think it unlocks a new perspective for us. And then, like you talked about, we talk Lego blocks. It's small moves. It's not, hey, I've suddenly, I'm 10 pant sizes, waist sizes bigger than I was in high school. I'm never going to get back. That's the why bother trap. That's the thing a lot of people fall into versus, yesterday I had fried chicken and a donut for breakfast. What if today I just had a salad for lunch? And then what if at the end of today, I celebrated the fact that I had a salad for lunch versus being like, well, all these other people do it. It's you versus you. And I think that, and we talk about it in the book, right? Get really clear on what's the game you're trying to play and who the real competition is. And what you find is the game you want to play is very different than other people's games. And you realize, I'm only in competition with the habits I've built, the beliefs I've started to accept, the stories I'm telling myself. And that's about it. And if I want to change it, I got to first get clear. What do I want to change? What about me has stopped that? And what, from a curiosity standpoint, would it look like differently if I just took one step? And the reminder I will tell everybody, and I literally had the conversation today with my wife, who's kind of going through a drier season, and when it comes to sales and in her company, is you lay a Lego block every day, you can build a skyscraper. It's a little bitty block. You do it once, nobody cares. You might step on it barefoot, you curse. But a Lego block stacked consistently can build skyscrapers. You just have to be consistent and intentional. And that's how I want you to think about a move. If you need a book along those lines, I'd tell you Gary Keller and Jay Papasan's The One Thing, or Atomic Habits by James Clear. But it's what's one little move that if I make today, doesn't change everything, but it puts me in a better position tomorrow.
I love that. And I've heard the concept of Lego blocks and Legos from so many different areas. One being having 3 kids myself. When they were younger, my ex-wife would, get a hand over a box or from a gift or something, and like I'd look at it, it's like 300 pieces, and I'm like, oh man. But it's literally page 1 is like you put this piece into this piece, and then you fast forward, 15, 20 pages, and you're putting the last 5 pieces together. But it was from all those pieces before. Talk about the Lego blocks. You said something that really resonated with me. I was listening to or watching a YouTube video in the morning when I was warming up, and Jocko Willink was talking about working out, and I'm going to butcher the exact words he used, but the essence of it was you look in the mirror today after a workout and you see nothing. You look in the mirror tomorrow after workout and you see nothing. He's like, after a week, you see nothing. You fast forward 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and you start to see it. And I think, I don't know what it was, but literally, as you know, nobody is motivated all the time. And anybody who puts out on social media that, hey, I wake up every day and I'm ready to go, they're probably drinking something other than coffee or an energy drink. But Jocko Willink is all about consistency. He's all about, some of the things you talked about. And I want to repeat for our listeners, Jake has repeated some of these words: clarity, simplicity, process, execution many, many, many times. And this goes back to what I feel is a compliment to you, is it's your very basic foundational process, and you do it today, you do it tomorrow, you do it the next day, and you're not going to see that monumental change 3 days later. You're not going to see that earth-shattering difference 4 days later, but you look at it 10 days, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and now all of a sudden you see those changes. And I think too many of us, and I'm guilty of it myself, look at somebody else on social media, look at somebody that's doing what you want to do or have been talking about doing, and just immediately you say, oh, I can't do it, or I'll never be able to get there.
Yeah, I mean, and to your point, like, and you've done it, which is why I'm going to give you a shout out. Like, you've done 75 hard. And that's why I love, like, their process. The most important part of that process, in my opinion, is the daily pictures. Because you can look back after 75 days and be like, oh, you don't see it day 1, 2, 3, but day 10, I noticed a little bit, and day 25, and then you're further motivated. I mean, growth and improvement, it's really like, how do I make it small and simple? How do I visibly see it? And how do I have accountability? Which is why Jerry Seinfeld, right? The X's on a box or X's on his calendar when he'd write a new joke was so key, because it was visible in his face every day that he made progress, even when the outcome wasn't there. And that's where we get caught up, is the outcome. And we talk about it all the time, and people are like, oh, it's so cliche, process over outcome, but it's it. You only control the inputs. And so if you focus on, what are my inputs? If you want to lose weight, what was my workout? What did I eat? How much water did I drink today? Right? I'm tracking my calories. I'm tracking my protein. Right? It's just focus on the inputs, and the outcomes take care of themselves. Bill Walsh, you win your championship trophies in practice. You just pick them up on game day. Focus on winning practice.
I love that. I remember I was working with a college team. It was either last year or the year before, and we were getting ready to start a practice that I was attending, and I just remember saying, how many people by a show of hands think we're going to win a championship today? And maybe 1 or 2 people put their hand up, but they weren't right or wrong per se. But the lesson was that we're not going to be crowned a championship trophy at the end of practice, nor is somebody come in at the end and say, hey, you didn't do good enough today, so the entire season is a wash and it's over. But what I said was, we can't control yesterday, and we're not going to be able to control tomorrow today. But over the next 2 hours, each one of us has the ability to raise our level, challenge the person next to us. And I think what I love about talking to people that do similar things is they say things a little bit differently, right? So over my right shoulder there, my last book, Process Before Results, very similar to what you just said, but not the exact words. But that's what I love about this space in personal development, is because you're going to read a quote or a book by somebody, and I'm going to say it to you, and you're going to be like, all right, that's pretty cool. Like, that sounds good. But then someone else is going to hear it or read it, and they're going to be like, that's the most amazing saying. They're going to get it tattooed on their arm. They're going to, put it on their wall. But that's the value of when you continue to level up and you build your mindset and you grow, you're saying things differently, you're learning things differently. So another follow-up question to kind of one of those is somebody that's listening right now, and even maybe myself included as well, struggling with being consistent with personal development. And I know it's super cliche and easy for us all to say, oh, just do it every day for 5 minutes or 10 minutes. But we all get curveballs thrown at us. Is there one thing, or has there been one thing that you've seen in either your coaching, your speaking, or the coaching that you receive from others that has really been a crucible to some of the things that you do on a daily basis?
Yeah, it's to understand I'm going to have streaks. Like, I'm going to have streaks. Yesterday was a perfect example. It was a Sunday. I had plenty of opportunities to read my 10 minutes, but I didn't. I got up, I got my workout, I did some work, I did a bunch of other stuff. I watched some football, took my parents to the game last night. Like, got home at 1 a.m. I wasn't picking up the book. I was going to bed. And so I understand, like, there's going to be grace in that process. However, I had the one thing I've learned to do is just have accountability. Habit share, which we both know so well, is like easiest way to do it is like, hey man, 5 out of 7 days this week, I want to read for 10 minutes and I'm going to check the box and it's going to send it to you. All I'm asking is, would you just do me the favor and call me or email me on Friday and say, did you do the thing? Right? That was easy. I told somebody that recently on a podcast. She was struggling. She's a mom. She got 3 kids. She's building a startup. And I was like, why are you comparing to me when I'm a dog dad? Like, we're playing different games. And she's like, well, how do you get it all done? I was like, simplify it and get accountability. And one of our friends was right there. And I was like, hey, Tara, would you email Lauren on Friday afternoon, 4:00? Just schedule it right now if you want. I don't even care. Schedule it to go out Friday at 4 and say, hey, what are the 3 things you got done this week? Lauren, you know it's coming. So you're going to have it ready and you're going to get the 3 priorities done. We're going to make it simple as possible. And that's it. Like, I try to have accountability in people who are willing to call me out, but more so, I know if I'm going through a season where I'm struggling or where I've gotten off track, the fastest way to get back on track is pick something simple and get somebody to hold me accountable to the action with it. So if you're like, man, I got to get back in the gym, I need a routine, put some stakes. Hey, Jake, I'm trying to get back in the routine. My goal for the next month, the rest of this year, I'm going 4 days a week to the gym. Workout, 45 minutes plus. If I do not do one of those days, I owe you $50 for every day I miss. Here's the log. Let's track it. Right? You add a little stakes. The reason people show up for personal trainers but not gym memberships, right? You increase the stakes a little bit. So I think those are the ways you gamify it. You make it a game and you score yourself and then be proud. One of my one-on-one coaching clients, we told him that. I was like, I want you for the next 2 weeks to cut off work at 3. I was like, you're working like 12-hour days, which didn't make sense based on everything we talked about. I want to see what you can get done by 3. Just do it for 2 weeks. It's not going to wreck your career. It's not going to wreck your business. You own your own business. And so he did it. He told his kids, he was like, come into my office at 3:05. If I'm still working, I owe you money. And they were at the door. And I said, how'd those 2 weeks go? He's like, well, I still had stuff to get done. I was like, you're always going to have stuff to get done. I said, how much did you pay him out? He's like, I only had to pay him once. I was like, there you go. I said, you were on point, but it was a test. Now we adjust. So I think that's the easiest way to kind of roll through that process.
I got to ask you, because you said a bunch of really good stuff. I've never heard it before, and I'm going to borrow it, and if I have to give you some rights to it, what is the exact verbiage you use? People show up for their training session, but they... Oh,
yeah. People show up for a personal trainer, but not their gym membership, right? The Globo gyms thrive on the membership programs because you pay $30 to $40 a month and you never go. If they were ever at 100% capacity, they couldn't function. There'd be no room. But a personal trainer, you're paying $100 to $200 for, you're not going to miss. And it's the same with like CrossFit classes. I mean, people that pay more show up because there's a financial incentive to be there versus not. It's also why people don't value what they get for free. Pay for a course, pay for a coach.
Which is so interesting because somebody that I know, you and I know well, Zig Ziglar, he was just so adamant about over delivering, and he would drive, an hour and a half somewhere and deliver a free speech. But, yes, it gets to that point, and I think so many people want to add value and over deliver, and I want to be clear on that is early on from day
I'm all
one.
for giving free value and over delivering. But if somebody were to approach you and say, "Hey, Chris, I want you to coach me, but I'm not willing to pay," like, oh, do you not have the money? Well, maybe you could even be like, "Hey, okay, cool, pay me $500, and if you don't show up for any of our sessions, I keep it. But if you show up for all 5 of our sessions and do the things we talk about doing, I'll give you your $500 back." Like there's those, but you got to have some kind of
skin in the game.
Something in the game.
I love that. I'm going to start doing that to my clients. Like, look, all right, don't pay me per se, but wire me X amount of dollars, and as long as you show up, and then the hope is that they fall into that gym membership, death trap, and they just never show up. No, I love that, and again, it's so cool to have different terminology used. So, want to give you an opportunity to share what's the best way for our listeners to not only get your book, but also if they want to find out more about your podcast, your speaking, and those other things you do. I really want to make sure you share that, because I know for a fact there are a bunch of people that are going to not only follow you if they're not already on social media, but also definitely check out some of your stuff. So please go ahead and share that.
Appreciate it, my guy. Best place is going to be competeeveryday.com. Compete Every Day. You'll find us website, social, everything links out from there. You can pre-order the book. Now the audio book, Kindle version will be coming out later this year. You can get those and paperback on Amazon, but we've got a ton of pre-order bonuses at competeeveryday.com. So there's some good reasons to pick up an early copy of the line and support the launch.
And then podcast and your speaking, same place?
Everything's on there. Yeah. So Compete Every Day will all link out. I've got a separate speaker website that's jakeathompson.com, but you can get to it from Compete Every Day. And then the Compete Every Day podcast every Monday and Thursday.
How many now? 900 and something?
Dude, I recorded 950 today.
Wow. I think tomorrow, this will be after the fact, it's like 620, 625. And it's just, again, so here's a lesson that I'm sharing. Full transparency. If I looked at Jake's number and said, okay, he's at 950, I'm at 630, just off the bat, he's better than me. I'm going to lose 100 out of 100 times. But instead, if I look at it as, okay, what can I learn from Jake? What does he do differently? What does he do really well? Is there an area I'm struggling in? And I want to touch on one thing that I put a note, and I do want to share. Last year, we both recorded each other on, I think we did it within a day or two or something like that. I was on yours a second time. You were on mine a second time. And we were talking about speaking. You not only said you would send me an email with a bunch of bullet points and things, you sent it within, I believe, an hour or so when we finished. I forget whether we're recording mine or yours, but I share that because I've been very fortunate to have some incredible people mentor me, coach me, but just give me advice that I always try to do the same. And when I've had the opportunity to connect with people like John Maxwell and some of those people that are at a very high level, they also share numerous stories about people that mentored them. So my point to that is, for our listeners, you can compete, and I'm a crazy competitive person myself, but you also can compete and bring out the best in somebody else. And I think that's something on social media that 99% of what's out there completely misses. So I want to just give you a chance to briefly touch on that, because I think it's something that you do really well, but you also understand the value in it.
Yeah, I mean, the value of that competitive mindset and being around it is crucial. And I think for the most part, it's been a constant struggle, which is why I've got multiple books on it, to really lean into not letting confidence and worth be tied to anyone but me. And I say that very intentionally, because I believe competing with other people helps you get better, but it absolutely ruins your life if that's all you seek happiness in, right? If the outcome is everywhere predetermined. AJ Brown, great example, won the Super Bowl last year. goes on social media 2 days later and says, everybody told me my entire life if I would be a champion, it would change everything. I'd be happy, I'd be fulfilled, it'd be a whole other level. Within not even 48 hours, I'm like, back to baseline. He said, I realized it was the competing, it was the pushing myself, it was the hard work. That's what I love. And for somebody that can achieve the things that very few people can ever achieve and say that, it holds weight. And so I just encourage everybody listening, like, be really intentional about the game you're playing in life. Because like even us, the two of us talking about the games that we're competing in, like you're building a different business than I am. There's overlap, but you're building an entirely different business than I am. And I've built an entirely different business than my coach did. And if I'm in this constant competition with everyone else, not only am I miserable if I'm looking at the people ahead, I'm complacent and arrogant if I'm looking at the people behind. And I'm going to end up reaching a destination and a goal that I would say is a default because I had zero desire to get there. I just thought I wanted it because you wanted it. And that's like a kid, right? A toddler steals a toy from another toddler, and then within seconds, they're done with it. They only wanted it because they had it. And they're like, well, it's not that good anyways. But we do that as adults all the time. And so get really clear on what matters to you. Like if you're an entrepreneur, you may not want to be the next Jeff Bezos. You may want to be, I want to make decent, good money and never miss one of my kids' soccer games. And when they play in high school and when they play in college. And some of you are like, no, I want to build this business and make this money and travel here and do that. And that's great, to each their own. But if you live in this constant state of comparison with everyone else, you're in trouble. But when you understand the competitions yourself, you know the game you want to play, then you get other people that you can compete with. Hey, I want to beat you in the basketball court. Hey, I'm going to beat you in the gym today. Then you have friendly rivalry pushes and you actually get better faster than you ever could by yourself.
I was going to ask you if you have any parting words, as that's how I leave every episode. You just shared some awesome, phenomenal advice, but I'm going to ask you anyway because I know you're just chock full of nuggets. So for our listeners, share whatever it is on your heart or mind in your parting words. And again, thank you for all that you do for not only those out there, but myself as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to go back to what I just said. Get really clear on the game you're playing. Understand that we live in a competitive culture and outcomes matter. It matters to win games as a coach. It matters to start. There's no denying that. Like, I want to say it's important. I'm not downplaying the benefits of outcomes. What I am saying, and what the research backs, is that when you focus on being your best and winning the game you care about winning, not only are you more fulfilled, you're better from a mental health standpoint, you're more likely to be happy and satisfied in the career and relationships you're pursuing. But oh, by the way, you tend up doing better than other people. When they studied endurance racers, what they found is the people that are some of the best endurance racers in the world, they're focused on competing with themselves. They're intrinsically driven to figure out their potential. The people who are obsessed with the awards, with the outcome of, am I better than you? Those are average. And so if you want to be where it's crowded, try to play the game against everyone else all the time. If you want to be at the top, focus on being your best, and you'll find a life that's worth competing for. And I would say is far more fulfilling along the way.
Could not have said it better myself. For our listeners, if you are a coach, a parent, if you are an athlete, and I know this book was written in middle school, I would say, or excuse me, high school, I would say middle school and even college, there's so much overlap. Grab a copy of The Line, A Story of Excellence in the Margins by yours truly, Jake Thompson. And if you're not listening to his podcast, make sure you do that after you listen to the No Quit Living podcast. But Jake, I cannot thank you enough for being on here a third time. And for our listeners, definitely grab a copy. And I appreciate you jumping on here again.
Appreciate it a ton. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to episode number 633. I always enjoy the opportunity to speak with Jake, and I'm sure you were able to take away a lot of value from what he shared. Jake touched on some key points that really stood out to me: simplicity, process, execution, and clarity. I want to leave you with a personal challenge. If you are struggling with an idea, a goal, or something you want to pursue or attempt, focus on clarity. As Jake mentioned, Too many people overcomplicate things, and often the difference between frustration and breakthrough is getting crystal clear on what you want and where you're going. I truly appreciate you listening, and as you go out and crush your day today, remember, we rise by lifting others up. And lastly, to our listeners, thank you. We truly appreciate your time, and we hope our episodes inspire you to keep on attacking life and never giving up. To quote Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, it's always too early to quit.